Spare. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Well, notwithstanding the Spanish indiscretion, as we might call it, Spare has finally arrived. And no, I certainly was not waiting at a midnight opening at a bookshop. I had better things to do with my time. Nevertheless, I have with me my copy of Spare for the purposes of reading it to you, and, of course, the primary purpose being to analyse it with regard to narcissism. There are certain channels, of course, that have jumped on the bandwagon of talking about Harry and Harry's wife, which has nothing to do with the primary purpose of their channel. Well, of course, it's entirely up to them if they wish to do that, but it does belie the lack of expertise when they talk about certain matters which are nothing to do with what their primary expertise is stated as being. Mine is a channel about narcissism, as you know, and has thousands of videos covering all different aspects of narcissism. With my analysis of Spare, I'm going to be looking at what Prince Harry has written in terms of helping you understand more about the interactions that he has, of course, with Harry's wife, the primary narcissist in this story, but also, of course, with his father, King Charles, another narcissist. There are, of course, other narcissists in the royal family that we will get to should they make an appearance, Prince Andrew being another one, and also to help you understand more about the mindset, behaviours, conduct of Harry as the intimate partner primary source. There's also matters, of course, to consider with regard to the actual formation of this publication. Whose ideas went into it? How has it been written? Where can we see the touch of the ghostwriter? Where can we see the clumsy hand of Harry's wife? Where is it clear that this is a revision of history, and in some instances, does it stack up in terms of seeing like it's real? Does it seem accurate? And of course, we'll be looking out for those revelations, although we may very well have been spoiled already with so many disclosures. So, settle back, and here we go. We agreed to meet a few hours after the funeral in the Frogmore Gardens by the old Gothic ruin. I got there first. I looked around, saw no one. I checked my phone. No texts, no voicemails. They must be running late, I thought, leaning against the stone wall. I put away my phone and told myself, stay calm. The weather was quintessentially April. Not quite winter, not yet spring. The trees were bare, but the air was soft. The sky was grey, but the tulips were popping. The light was pale, but the indigo lake threading through the gardens glowed. How beautiful it all is, I thought, and also how sad. Somehow I don't think that Prince Harry would be stood there remarking upon the sky was grey, the light was pale, the air was soft, but there we are. Once upon a time, this was going to be my forever home. Instead, it had proved to be just another brief stop. When my wife and I fled this place, well, there she is. So, onto the first page, basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 paragraph in, she gets mentioned. When my wife and I fled this place, in fear for our sanity and physical safety, I wasn't sure when I'd come back. That was January 2020. Now, 15 months later, here I was, days after waking to 32 missed calls and then one short heart-racing talk with Granny. Harry, Grandpa's gone. The wind picked up, turned colder. I hunched my shoulders, rubbed my arms, regretted the thinness of my white shirt. I wish I'd not changed out of my funeral suit. I wish I'd thought to bring a coat. Yes, a grown man who doesn't even know how to dress for the weather. No surprises there with Harry, huh? I turned my back to the wind and saw looming behind me the Gothic ruin, which in reality was no more Gothic than the Millennium Wheel. Some clever architect, some bit of stagecraft, like so much around here, I thought. Again, I very much doubt he thought that at the time. This has been added afterwards, and again is an early barb against stagecraft in the royal family. So if you're playing Harry's bullshit bingo and you're looking out for attack against royal family, mention of Harry's wife, well, you've got 2 already. How long will it be before his mum gets mentioned? I moved from the stone wall to a small wooden bench. Sitting, I checked my phone again, peered up and down the garden path. Where are they? Another gust of wind. Funny, it reminded me of Grandpa. His wintry demeanour, maybe, or his icy sense of humour. I recalled one particular shooting weekend years ago. A mate, just trying to make conversation, asked Grandpa what he thought of my new beard, which had been causing concern in the family and controversy in the press. Should the Queen force Prince Harry to shave? Grandpa looked at my mate, looked at my chin, broke into a devilish grin. That's no beard. Everyone laughed. To beard or not to beard? That was the question. But leave it to Grandpa to demand more beard. Let grow the luxurious bristles of a bloody Viking. I thought of Grandpa's strong opinions, his many passions, carriage driving, barbecuing, shooting, food, beer, the way he embraced life. He had that in common with my mother. Ba-ding! Here she comes. Maybe that was why he'd been such a fan. Long before she was Princess Diana, back when she was simply Diana Spencer, kindergarten teacher, secret girlfriend of Prince Charles, my grandfather was her loudest advocate. Interesting that the first mention of his mother gets her title wrong. It should be Diana, Princess of Wales. You'd have thought that he would know that, and you'd have thought the ghostwriter would know that, but there we are. Some said he actually brokered my parents' marriage. If so, an argument could be made that Grandpa was the prime cause in my world, but for him, I wouldn't be here. Now, of course, what he's driving at is saying that if it wasn't for his grandpa, he wouldn't have been here because he brought Diana and Charles together. But the fact is, you've missed a quite obvious point there, Harry. If your grandfather hadn't had your father, then you wouldn't have been here. So your grandpa was instrumental in your appearance, irrespective of bringing your mother and father together. And then he tells us sagely, neither would my older brother. Then again, maybe our mother would be here if she hadn't married Pa. Right. I recall one recent chat, just me and Grandpa, not long after he turned 97. He was thinking about the end. He was no longer capable of pursuing his passions, he said. And yet the thing he missed most was work. Without work, he said everything crumbles. He didn't seem sad, just ready. You have to know when it's time to go, Harry. I glanced now into the distance towards the mini skyline of crypts and monuments alongside Frogmore, the royal burial ground. Final resting place for so many of us, including Queen Victoria, also the notorious Wallis Simpson, also her doubly notorious husband Edward, the former king and my great-great-uncle. After Edward gave up his throne for Wallis, after they fled Britain, both of them fretted about their ultimate return, both obsessed about being buried right here. The Queen, my grandmother, granted their plea, but she placed them at a distance from everyone else, beneath a stooped plane tree. One last finger wag, perhaps. One final exile, maybe. I wondered how Wallis and Edward felt now about all their fretting. Did any of it matter in the end? I wondered if they wondered at all. Were they floating in some airy realm, still mulling their choices, or were they nowhere, thinking nothing? Deep, deep thoughts from Harry here, huh? Could there really be nothing after this? Does consciousness, like time, have a stop? Or maybe, I thought, just maybe, they're here right now, next to the fake Gothic ruin, or next to me, eavesdropping on my thoughts. And if so, maybe my mother is too. The thought of her as always gave me a jolt of hope and a burst of energy and a stab of sorrow. I missed my mother every day, but that day on the verge of that nerve-wracking rendezvous at Frogmore, I found myself longing for her, and I couldn't say just why. Like so much about her, it was hard to put into words. I think that's just basically, you struggle with words as it is, Harry. Although my mother was a princess named after a goddess, both those terms always felt weak, inadequate. People routinely compared her to icons and saints, from Nelson Mandela to Mother Teresa to Joan of Arc. But every such comparison, while lofty and loving, also felt wide of the mark. The most recognizable woman on the planet, one of the most beloved, my mother was simply indescribable. That was the plain truth. And yet, how could someone so far beyond everyday language remain so real, so palpably present, so exquisitely vivid in my mind? How was it possible that I could see her clear as the swan skimming towards me on that indigo lake? How could I hear her laughter, loud as the songbirds in the bare trees still? There was so much I didn't remember, because I was so young when she died. But the greater miracle was all that I did. Her devastating smile, her vulnerable eyes, her childlike love of movies and music and clothes and sweets, and us. Oh, how she loved my brother and me. Obsessively, she once confessed to an interviewer. Well, Mummy, vice versa. Maybe she was omnipresent for the very same reason that she was indescribable, because she was light, pure and radiant light. And how can you really describe light? Even Einstein struggled with that one. Well, you've no fucking chance then, have you, Harry? Recently, astronomers rearranged their biggest telescopes, aimed them at one tiny crevice in the cosmos, and managed to catch a glimpse of one breathtaking sphere, which they named Irondale, the old English word for morning star. Billions of miles off and probably long vanished, Irondale is closer to the Big Bang, the moment of creation, than our own Milky Way, and yet it's somehow still visible to mortal eyes because it's just so awesomely bright and dazzling. That was my mother. You can see here the influence of the ghostwriter, as I can't imagine Harry knowing about Irondale, and the ghostwriter has taken the emotions that he feels about his mother and woven them into this magical testament to her. I can't imagine that Harry's wife has a hand in this section either, because she won't like the fact that he's talking more about his mother than about her. Remember, even though she seeks to duplicate Diana, which is done for the purposes of controlling Harry, narcissists don't like you talking about other people. We want you talking about us. And therefore, although she got a very early mention, one wonders how much of this will be about Harry's wife, which will, of course, be commensurate with her need to be mentioned time and time again. Of course, her ignited fury would be kept under control in relation to these sections. She might not have been involved in the discussion, therefore it didn't trouble her. But if she were to sit and read all of this, she'd almost be flicking through, when does it get to me? When does it get to me? Because she's not interested in all of this. She might feign an interest in it for the purpose of controlling Harry, but there isn't any actual interest. And the descriptions so far, of course, very much have the fingerprints of the ghostwriter. It's too polished for Harry, shall we say. That was my mother. That was why I could see her, sense her, always, especially that April afternoon at Frogmore. That and the fact that I was carrying her flag. I'd come to those gardens because I wanted peace. I wanted it more than anything. I wanted it for my family's sake and for my own, but also for hers. Well, we know that he banged on about peace in his interviews, and this was back in March 2021, and he claims that he's striving for peace, but he acts more as if he wants a war with his repeated shit-flinging at the royal family. More hypocrisy, of course. People forget how much my mother strove for peace. She circled the globe many times over, traipsed through minefields, cuddled AIDS patients, consoled war orphans, always working to bring peace to someone, somewhere. And I knew how desperately she would did want, peace between her boys, and between us two and Pa, and among the Ho family. For months the Windsors had been at war. There had been strife in our ranks, off and on, going back centuries. But this was different. This was a full-scale public rupture, and it threatened to become irreparable. Well, who's behind all of this, Harry? Your wife. So though I'd flown home specifically and solely for Grandpa's funeral, while there, I'd asked for this secret meeting with my older brother, Willie, and my father to talk about the state of things, to find a way out. But now I looked once more at my phone and once more up and down the garden path, and I thought maybe they've changed their minds, maybe they're not going to come. For half a second I considered giving up, going for a walk through the gardens by myself, or heading back to the house where all my cousins were drinking and sharing stories of Grandpa. Then, at last, I saw them, shoulder to shoulder, striding towards me. They looked grim, almost menacing. More, they looked tightly aligned. My stomach dropped. Normally they'd be squabbling about one thing or another, but now they appeared to be in lockstep, in league. The thought occurred, hang on, are we meeting for a walk or a duel? I rose from the wooden bench, made a tentative step towards them, gave a weak smile. They didn't smile back. Now my heart really started thrashing in my chest. Deep breaths, I told myself. It's interesting, isn't it, how this somewhat cocky individual who has done a couple of tours of Afghanistan starts shitting his pants just when he's meeting his brother and his father, or as we know in one of the extracts it was mentioned about on another occasion in Parts Passim, that he was crapping himself about asking the Queen for permission, despite the fact that he said he got such a very good relationship with the Queen. One wonders how much revisionist history is placed upon this in order to try and engender sympathy for him as the always nervous, always anxious young man. Or not so young man as he is now. Apart from fear, I was feeling a kind of hyper-awareness and a hugely intense vulnerability, which I'd experienced at other moments of my life. Walking behind my mother's coffin, going to battle for the first time, giving a speech in the middle of a panic attack. There was that same sense of embarking on a quest, and not knowing if I was up to it, while also fully knowing there was no turning back, that fate was in the saddle. Okay, Mummy, I thought, picking up the pace, here goes. Wish me luck. I'll continue with more analysis of Harry's Spare in the next video. Join me there.